about 25 years ago, and just made them from a packet of tongue and groove that I got down at the local hardware shop, and you know, they suit this old kitchen. But you can clearly see the problem here. I mean, if I push that down and push that down, that's how it should be, but I've got some serious warp on here. This is a cupboard that's just opposite. I've got some plumbing behind here that I'm covering up, and there's serious heat that's generated in here, and this has been here for the same period of time, 25 years, and this is as flat as a billiard table. And there's braces on either side of the doors, but no ledges, and you could argue that that was possibly the cause for the problem. I'm not sure, I don't know. I certainly didn't change the design of the door when I made the one that I just showed you down in front of the plumbing. That's worked and stayed completely flat. This is hardwood flooring. It's not solid, it's a couple of mil thick on the outside, and it's backed onto pine. And this stuff is perfectly flat and perfectly straight, and I think that this would be the ideal material to make those edge and brace doors out of. We need to put chamfers on these, and we can't afford to blow out the end. So that puts a nice little chamfer that matches the tiny chamfer that it has on the edge. This block plane is a far better option than trying to use a router, because you're dealing with only 2mm of wood on the surface. So, I take my time, and I don't want to cause any splits on the outside. 91 total width, allowing for a little bit of a gap. Cut that in half. This stuff cuts like butter on the table saw, and I'm just taking off the rough edges and giving it a gentle chamfer to match that is on the end. With the glue up, I think I was using the Type 2, which is a much quicker drying time, and that wasn't really an issue, because I was just going to put these all together and make sure that they were flat, because before I put any ledge and brace on the back of it, I want to make sure that these are completely flat, and they are, and that's reassuring to me, because that's the whole reason why I'm doing this job in the first place. And as I buzzed over this with, I think, 240 and then 120, I'm spitting dust up, which is hitting the lens. So the room itself is clean, but I didn't realise that the camera needed to clean. And number 5 is used here to clean the edges up, and I'm trying to get as much of the sole in contact with that edge, so that I keep the edges square. And on the second plank, I think I probably got a bit confused which way the grain was, and found myself sort of spinning it around. In fact, there you can see I spin it around because I've got the wrong way. But it gets a nice finish, and that is what I'm looking for. If you can avoid measuring, that's great. These are all the braces which are all the same in length, so I'm just putting them all together and then stacking them up and chopping the ends in one go, having just measured the top one. One of the braces is rocking here, so I'm just going to attend to one of the high spots with that block plane. I've put some cross-hatching lines on here where it was rocking. So this obviously proves that this is the high spot here. It's really important to me to make sure that these ledges fit beautifully, and so when they're nailed down along with the braces, they are totally flush to the surface that they're supporting. We've been left with these nail gun holes. It's almost like you're filling the hole with glue. Watch what happens. So a simple trick, great result. If I make a face frame that fits around it, Obviously, because that wood is from the same family, you get a really rather good colour match.
I was nervous cutting into this board because of its cost. It's difficult to cut on the chop saw, but it's like a knife through butter on the table saw, and it planes beautifully.
All I'm really trying to do is to remove the tool marks off it from when it was on the table saw. So I'm going for full width, lots of downward pressure, and it looks like some piece of code, but we still need to get rid of. It causes that sort of problem there. So we need to work till we get rid of that. Right, one more. One more. This is much easier than working with pine to get a good finish. I mean, that is absolutely beautiful. So I've got my thumb in the top here, and this finger here is indexing it, so I'm holding there, and I'm indexing with that finger there. This is the number 4, or referred to as a smoothing plane, and so what I want to do is I want to put this in the vise, and I want to just go over this with a number 4 smoothing plane. A bit of wax on the sole.
This is where sharpening your blade with a slight camber means that you don't get plane tracks when you're putting a nice smooth face on a plank.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
This one particular plank was perplexing because the grain was actually running in opposite directions on either side of the plank.
That's being jointed by hand, and if I just touch it like that, you cannot see. So I need to make the tops and the bottoms of the face frame.
I cut this about 2mm wider than I needed, which gave me 1 millimetre to be able to plane off each side.
Is I'm going to put a mark on this, and if I was to turn this over, you would see a similar mark on this as well. And the reason being is that reminds me that that is the side I'm not going to be working on.
Despite how this appears, I really took my time to plane these flat and square.
So by taping this lot together, it means that when I flip it around, I can cut the other ends as one piece of wood.
You can see the chops are really labouring to get through this material, it's so hard.
But at least now I know that those two pieces of wood, because they're taped together, are identical in length. And then the same goes for, these are the top and bottoms.
I decided on biscuits as my method of joinery, as they are basically like little floating tenons.
These are the biscuits that I've had to slightly reduce, so you can see I put a pencil mark on there. And it's just quicker to plane it off with a plane.
This is probably not the ideal tool for the job, but it was what was available, so I used it.
The test pieces that I've done, and because of the width of this piece of stock, I can't afford to go full depth, so that's why I've been thinning these things down.
I really took my time over this process because just one little mistake and it's going to ruin that wood, and I haven't got much of it to spare. And now I'm trying to make little extensions, I suppose, for my workshop table in preparation for the glue up.
I don't want to build a twist into it, so I've looked down here and almost treated this like a pair of winding sticks to see if I can see, you know, any kind of twist, and I can't, so it's good. And really I'm looking for flushness on the face. It's time to go ahead and glue it. I'm going to go with that stuff, which is the Titebond 3.
Much better drying times on the Titebond 3. It's ideally suited to bigger glue-ups like this. And then you can now see that it's nice and flat.
We get that appearance of a butt joint, except the fact that we know that we've got a nice biscuit inside it. We'll have to sand off those registration marks.
That's the top compared to the bottom. And again, there's no twist.
And I've measured from the outside to the inside, and again from the outside to the centre there, and I know that I need to take about 1 millimetre off each door.
I was very careful to wax my table saw before I attempted this because I didn't want any bits of grit or damage to the table to cause any scratches on those doors. And just lots and lots of little slithers taken off in order to get a nice beautiful fit. And because that little block plane was I had done so much work and had more to do, I thought it was a good time to give it a sharpen.
This face frame here isn't exactly completely flat, and there's a bit of a bulge here, so what I need to do is to take the doors off, and once I've taken the doors off I need to make this surface completely flat, because the face frame that I've made is completely flat.
So this process requires removing the screws that hold in that framework and the doors, but the screws first around the framework, and then re-drilling them, re-countersinking them, and then putting the screws back in again before you start attacking it with block planes to flatten it out. And then from there it's just the laborious task of removing the high spots and then taking the frame, putting it up against it, looking for all the places where it's contacting, and then attacking those individually. And what you're aiming for is contact everywhere, and when that happens you've got two perfectly smooth flat surfaces, and you can see how much material was removed.
So all up there, there and there. So if that's a high spot, that's a high spot, and all that's a high spot. Plan is that I'm going to take the frame into the workshop, I'm going to mount the doors, and then I will take the hinges off, and then I will drill basically underneath where the hinges would go, so that when I put the hinges back on again, it'll cover up the screws, so I can have a couple of screws here on either side.
I did think about putting new hinges on it, but I saw little point, as I was pretty happy with the hinges already had, and this was just my way of motivating myself by looking at the old knackered doors. When it came to putting the new hinges on, you can see that I've gone to great troubles to make sure that the hinges all appear in the same place, and so I've clamped in position set squares to make sure that I get absolute consistency, and then just giving it a final little tune up with a block plane to make sure that those doors are as perfect as possible and that all the gaps will be equal but as small as possible.
Really need to go outside, and I need to paint the edges of the frame that's on there at the moment, which is pine. I need to paint that white.
If I was going to do this again, I'd probably put the first coat of paint on as some kind of stain block, because the wax does have a tendency to sort of brown the paint.
If I just put a little drop of filler like that, oops, like that, then a putty knife, and just wet it like that. When that's painted over, you'll never see the holes. I'm intending to put a screw through there and a screw through there, and I can do that on each one of the hinges.
So now I'm taking the hinges off, and I'm going to drill in between where I've put the hinge screws at about a 30-degree angle, the idea being that I don't want to encourage the wood to split.
You can see that there are two areas Now this one has been waxed with antique brown and this one is with clear, and I have to say I can't really see much of a difference between either. But I mean, obviously I'm trying to emulate this finish here, which I'm guessing by definition must have been a clear finish.
This is probably one of the most fun things you'll ever do in carpentry. It's lovely. You can see the big countersink holes that I've put in so that those screws won't be affected by the hinges that sit on top of them. And it's ridiculously smooth. It's like silk. I just love that instant gratification when you just put something that changes the colour and the wood just immediately pops. And we always, you know, like I said, we can always darken this up. If this isn't dark enough, we can always put a darker wax on this. It's taking on a real lustre. I mean, whoops. I had intended to buy new doorknobs for this, but I thought at the last minute I'll put a bit of 120 Abranet on it and see what I can achieve, and I got a stunning finish. A completely different colour. That's almost got like, you know, that one almost looks a bit reddish, chestnutty. Off camera I put a second coat of paint on the framework of the, you know, existing carcass that's on the wall, and I'm just going to go and put the third and final coat on. Precisely there is where we filled and went over it with the putty knife and then just painted, so there's no rubbing or sanding down. I think that night before I went to bed I actually put a coat of stain block on it and then gave it another coat the next day, so it probably had about 5 coats in the end. I need to lift the door up very slightly, so I've got this ingenious little device which you can buy very cheaply. You slide it underneath the door and you press this, and as you press this it basically inflates the bladder which lifts the door, and then when you want to get it out you undo that little valve there and she's good to go. So I've only got to raise this a little bit. It's like having a helper. It is an ingenious little mechanism, I have to say, and it works, you know, perfectly well on large doors, and it worked very well on this. I was so keen to make sure that I could get exactly in the centre of the screw hole because I didn't want any of those very, very tiny gaps to get messed up, and it absolutely worked like a dream. Very, very, very good system. And actually, once you've got it, you'll wonder how you coped before. I mean, I used to make wedges of wood and stick my toe underneath it, or, you know, get somebody else to hold it. But this is the way to go. Final little tune-up with the block plane. It closes, but it's just making a slight noise, so I'm literally probably just putting a little chamfer on the back of that door. Off camera I've fitted the magnetic door catches, and now I'm just fitting the handles, and I've got a little bit of tape attached to the door to help me open it. The last one. So I really took my time marking out where I was going to drill these holes to make sure that they're utterly symmetrical. And she's finished, and I'm absolutely delighted. I got the finish that I wanted. Very happy with the colour match between the face frame and the doors themselves, and that little butt joint looks nice. Even the hinges look pretty shiny, pretty decent. Considering all I wanted was doors that weren't warped, I'm pretty happy with the end result. And there's a reminder of what we started off with. And a couple of days later, and a bit of effort, that's what we finish with. If you like what you've seen, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.